Sylvia Browne built her career by claiming to possess a unique gift, a gift that allowed her to communicate with the dead, predict the future, and uncover hidden secrets. While this brought her fame and a massive following, many people have raised concerns about the legitimacy of her psychic abilities and the consequences of her claims. From lying about working with the FBI on unsolved cases and murders to being charged with fraud, Sylvia Browne seems to be more grifter than gifted. The 90s was a time when popularity in psychics was rising. It was the tail end of the spiritualist movement of the late 20th century, and TV psychics and phone psychics were all the rage in the 90s. So, in today's video, we will be delving into the truth and lies of Sylvia Browne. I will preface this as well. I'll probably throw this in here as we go, but I grew up in this. Like, my mom was a professional psychic and I grew up on the psychic circuit, so I'm pretty familiar with this stuff. And, I have my own opinions on psychics, but people like Sylvia Browne and some, obviously were taking advantage of people, but I kind of had a different sort of upbringing than I think most people did. So I've seen a lot of this circuit firsthand, and I'm pretty familiar with what happened during the 90s at this time. So I'll probably be providing some personal conjecture at points during this video as well. Humble beginnings. Sylvia Celeste Shoemaker was born on October 19, 1936 in Kansas City, Missouri. She was the daughter of William Lee and Celeste Shoemaker. Her father held several different jobs, from retail to government to even working as VP of a freight trucking company. Sylvia's family had a diverse religion with an Episcopalian mother, a Lutheran maternal grandmother, a Jewish father, and other relatives with a mix of different faiths. Sylvia was in the end raised Catholic and sent to Catholic school. She says that she started seeing visions at the age of 3. However, apparently people say who have read her books, this age differs in her books. And later on in different interviews, she said that she remembers 5, but she was told 3. So I think that maybe that's how she corrected herself. It seems like an overcorrection that she did down the road. She said her grandmother, who was also a psychic medium, helped her understand what her visions meant. Browne also said that her great uncle was a psychic medium and was, quote, rabid about UFOs. Sylvia reportedly worked with a guardian spirit who is named Francine, who she talks about quite a bit in her books and in some of her different stories. Sylvia always claimed to have a degree in English literature, but she ended up providing documentation that she went to college to disprove something that an ex-husband of hers said, but all the documentation showed is that she dropped out of college, so she never actually got a degree. She kind of shot herself in the foot on that one. Sylvia married 4 times. Her first marriage was to Gary. I'm going to mispronounce stuff sometimes, but Google says that this is pronounced as Dufresne. The couple had 2 sons, Paul and Christopher. They got divorced in 1972, and then she went on to marry. Her second marriage was to Kensil Dazel Browne. She took the surname Browne from this marriage, but he didn't have an E at the end of it, so she added an E later, I guess, to add to her stage name. This second marriage we'll come back to as well. She seemed to do a lot more shady things when she was married to the second fellow. So her third marriage was to Larry Beck, and her last marriage was to Michael Ulrey, who she stayed married to until her death in 2013. There's obviously a lot more to her background. Feel free to Google it if you want to learn more. I just don't want to spend too much time on it because we have a lot of other stuff to cover. So let's carry on. Her rise to fame. So Browne started working as a psychic in 1973, and at this time she was giving free readings to people and she wasn't getting paid for it. But a former friend said about her, quote, "Since she knew that I was a Christian, she worked everything around cleverly to try to make me believe that what she was doing was approved by the Christian church, and that God had sent her to me because he wanted the two of us to work together to spread the word throughout the world." And that same person also states that Sylvia refused to accept money for her services, believing God would take away her powers if she did. This is also a claim that Sylvia repeated in her books. And that same friend also explains the loophole that she used. They said, quote, "I also noticed that she began taking what she called donations of money. When I confronted her about this, reminding her that she told me that she couldn't ever charge for her work, both as her and as Francine, she told me that God had suddenly told her that she could accept donations rather than charging people, because after all, how were her and Doll supposed to live?" And this friend of hers quickly saw through what Sylvia was trying to pull. But how did Sylvia Browne rise to fame so quickly? Well, she wrote a lot. She actually authored over 40 books, and 22 of them ended up on the New York Times bestseller list. Her books really is what made her famous, and honestly, back then, there wasn't internet yet, and there wasn't really any particular teachings of new spiritualist movements, so if someone came up with something that seemed to kind of work and seemed to make sense, then everyone was overjoyed to follow it. A lot of her books were really talking about the afterlife and angels and reincarnation and different things of that nature, and it just kind of captivated everyone because everyone was still at the tail end of the spiritualist movement at this time. So people were very much invested in this new age kind of content. And she also positioned herself, she moved into California as well, positioning herself in a good geographic location to be able to get her name out there more. And then she started going on talk shows. Back in the 1990s, no one really questioned psychics. People were just really enthralled with them, and they didn't really scrutinize them too much. It was sort of like a little bit of a show and raised ratings, got people views, and raised advertiser funds, made money for TV shows and radio shows. So people were gladly allowing psychics to come on their show back then. She was on a number of shows, but to start, she did initially, from what I could tell, got her first start on a show called People Are Talking, and that was in San Francisco, 1978. And then in 1979, she appeared on a TV show called In Search Of, and it was like a ghost hunting, ghost story kind of show.
In exorcisms, Sylvia Browne is placed in a trance in order to make contact with the spirit.
Prayers must be said in this house. Prayers must be said over the man at the end of the table. Release all negativity. And whatever is in this house that is of any negative energy, we command by the will of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit that it goes on to progression and perfection.
Just to go through a quick list of her other appearances. In 1989, she was in Exploring Psychic Powers Live. That was a live show she didn't do too well in. 1991 or 92, she started appearing on The Montel Williams Show, which is really what brought her up into the majority of her fame, to be honest. 1991, she was in a show called Haunted Live. She portrayed herself in a reenactment of a haunted Toys R Us store. In 1992, she was in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries and also in a show called Sightings. 1996, she was in a show, episode of America's Castles. And she also appeared on Larry King, but I couldn't really find a clear date as to when her first appearance was, but his show ran from 1985 to 2010. Her appearances started waning off around 2007 to 2008. Really, it was 2008 because that was about the time when one of her predictions went horribly wrong. A child that she predicted incorrectly about, Sean Hornbeck, kind of blew up in her face, and she started avoiding people, and she stopped appearing on TV shows, and social media was really going at her because at the time now the internet was up and she couldn't really hide from her false predictions anymore. But during the time that she was on TV, especially the Montel Williams Show, she cultivated herself quite a large following. Montel Williams and Larry King were well-respected people, and her being on them gave her some sense of credibility back then. And by 2000 2007, when she started waning off of TV shows, she had a 4-year waiting list for readings by telephone, and they were $700 for a 20-minute telephone call. That same year as well, hundreds of people joined Browne on a cruise, each paying thousands of dollars for psychic readings, but it was group readings. And there was a journalist that actually went on that cruise, and he did report the predictions didn't really make sense. Audience members were upset, realizing that she was a fraud. She didn't show up to some of the events. Her answers were short and cold. She ran away from people when they ran into her outside of her sit-downs as well. So then she denied everything in the end and said that he was making up everything. But, Montel Williams had her on quite a lot. And people once asked him in a radio interview, why do you have Sylvia Browne on your show so often? And he said, she's great, she's funny, she's a character, she's hysterical.
To Sylvia Browne. She's been a friend of the show and to myself for the last 17 years. And every time she's here, the audience goes crazy.
Montel Williams, this is where we're going to delve more into her. Sylvia was most famous for her work as a psychic detective, solving murders and finding missing children. She claimed to be 85% correct. So let's discuss some of these predictions. Predictions. Numerous cases, in the majority of her public known cases, Sylvia Browne's predictions have been proven wrong. In many cases, she's been accused of making vague and generic predictions that could apply to almost anyone or anything. The lack of her being specific really raises questions about the validity of her claims, and people questioned whether she was really truly communicating with the dead or just using her charisma to deceive people. Sylvia Browne's first husband, Gary Dufresne, actually gave an interview to Robert Lancaster where he's quoted as saying, "The damage she does to unsuspecting people in crisis situations is atrocious." He then went on to tell a story about one evening where she was doing a tarot party at their house for people. After everyone left, they were cleaning up, and he asked her, how do you dupe these people? How do you take advantage of them like this? None of this is true. And she responded with something along the lines of, screw 'em. Anyone who believes this ought to be taken. And this was reported in The Guardian. Speaking of duping people,
I lost my boyfriend tragically, a few years ago. They never found him. And I've had such a hard time since. Every day.
The reason why you didn't find him is because he's in water. And to find him in water, it's like the girl that's missing in Aruba. You can't find somebody.
Well, it was September 11th. He was a fireman, but
no, see, I keep seeing him in water. Is there any way he could have drowned in water some way?
they never found a piece of him. Nothing.
From 9/11.
Because he says he couldn't breathe and he was filled with water.
I'm just going to throw in this clip. It's the only one I could find. It has some annoying, noises in it. But she makes a prediction. She makes a few in here, but the most important one that she makes in here is about the economy and property. And this was right before the real estate collapse in 2008.
And now how about we're looking at all the signs of it right now? Are we going to have one of those pre-election slowdowns when it comes to, the economy?
No, I think we are going to have a little bit, but by mid-year it recoups, and then you're really going to see it really come up.
So the economy will bounce back.
Yeah, but I'm still scared of, stock market because it really roller coasters. Today it was high, tomorrow will be low. It's just crazy.
What's the best investment for the next year?
Property.
Property, period.
Yeah, and see now property will go back up next year. Do you see what I mean?
The key takeaway on this one, saying that property is a good investment is normally an answer at any other time except for that period in history. It was really bad. And she also goes on to say too that, she's not sure about the stock market. It could go up and down. So she gave actually a really vague answer about the economy that would have come true if there wasn't the housing collapse of 2008, because that answer could have went either way, because she even said that the stock market can go either way. But let's really delve into her most damaging predictions and psychic advice, or whatever you might want to call it. And these are the most concerning ones because they involve missing person cases, and she affected families, she devastated people, she sent investigations in wrong ways. Every public account that's available to look at, she has never been right in any of them, and any of the ones that we don't know the outcome on, it's been vague, which I'll get into the statistics on that after. But first, let's talk about a few of the cases that she was extremely wrong on. In 1999, Sylvia Browne said that 6-year-old Opal Jo Jennings, who disappeared a month earlier, had been forced into slavery in Japan. Later that year, however, a local man was convicted of kidnapping and murdering Jennings. In a 2003 autopsy, the remains found that she had died within hours of her abduction.
On the Montel Williams show in 1999, Brown shared this information with the grandmother of a missing child named Opal Jo Jennings.
She's not dead, but what bothers me, now I've never heard of this before, but for some reason she was taken and put into some kind of slavery thing and taken into Japan.
4 years later, the little girl's remains were found near Fort Worth, Texas. An autopsy showed she was killed shortly after vanishing.
In 2002, Sylvia informed the parents of 11-year-old Sean Hornbeck, who had disappeared earlier that year, that he had been kidnapped by a dark-skinned Hispanic man with dreadlocks, and that Sean was now deceased. Sylvia claimed to have a vision that Sean's body would be found between 2 boulders in the middle of a forest. But Sean was found alive in 2007. His kidnapper was Caucasian and short-haired and been holding him in St. Louis. A journalist actually realized a connection between Ben Ownby and Sean and kind of put the 2 and 2 together and helped the police find the 2 boys.
4 months after Sean disappeared, the Akers appeared on the Montel Williams show with self-proclaimed psychic Sylvia Browne. Browne told the distraught parents that Sean was dead and told them in great detail where to search for his body.
The guy was dark-skinned, although he wasn't black, he was more as Hispanic looking. Had real long dark hair, and strange enough Hispanic, but he had dreadlocks.
Then Sylvia Browne confirmed their worst fears.
Is he still with us?
Thankfully, Sean Hornbeck was found last week alive and well. His alleged abductor, Michael Devlin, is not Hispanic, and he didn't have dreadlocks at the time of the abduction. But she was terribly wrong about the most important detail of all.
Hearing that was one of the hardest things we ever had to hear.
The search for Sean was diverted, according to his parents, based on the misinformation Browne had given, costing the effort valuable man-hours. Sean's parents, Craig and Pam Akers, also say Browne offered to help them for money.
I forgot to also add, Sylvia Browne always told everyone that when it came to children, cases involving children, that she would work on them for free, but multiple parents came forward saying that she offered to help them only if they paid money. Another case in 2002, Sylvia gave a prediction on a missing person, Holly Cruson, who had disappeared in 1995. Sylvia said that she was working as an exotic dancer in a Hollywood nightclub. She told this to her mother, Gwen, who then went over to Hollywood and began looking for her daughter at every nightclub that she could. In the end, in 2006, they positively identifying a body using dental records in San Diego as Holly Cruson. And that body had been sitting there for a year after she disappeared. So it was there since 2003. Another one in 2002, Sylvia said that Linda McClelland, who had disappeared in the year 2000, had been taken by a man with the initials MJ, and that she was alive in Orlando, Florida, and would soon be found. But in 2003, it was discovered that McClelland's son-in-law, David Rapatsky, who had been present at Sylvia Browne's psychic reading, was actually convicted of murdering Linda. Her remains were found near her home in Pennsylvania. In 2004, Sylvia said that Ryan Catcher, a 19-year-old who had disappeared in the year 2000, had been murdered and his body could be found in a metal shaft. But in 2006, his body was found in his truck at the bottom of a pond where he had drowned, not been murdered. And one of the biggest controversial oopsies that she did was in 2004. She told the mother of kidnapped victim Amanda Berry, who had disappeared 19 months earlier. She told her, "She's not alive, honey." And she said that she's in water. She had a vision that Berry's jacket was in the garbage with DNA on it. Berry's mother died 2 years later, believing that her daughter had been killed. But in 2013, Amanda Berry escaped from her captor and called 911. Her and 2 other women were freed from a man named Castro. And unfortunately, her mother died just a couple years after Sylvia Browne's prediction. And many of her friends say that she gave up on life after she found out that her daughter was dead. She was still looking for her daughter's killer, but she really lost a lot of life in her. And the aftermath of this can be seen in how her daughter reacted to the whole thing.
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now.
The resident psychic Sylvia Browne spoke of Amanda.
I don't think I'll ever see her again. Yeah, in heaven on the other side.
I can't believe she said that. And then my mom broke down crying, so that hurt even worse.
Additionally, someone else has pointed it out, and even thinking back to my recollection of Sylvia Browne, I don't think very often did she say that it was a Caucasian person who is the perpetrator. There's obviously some issues as well that Sylvia had to certain type of people. Sylvia also had a habit of going into shows and making predictions on something that was just recently reported on, hoping that people didn't catch the report yet. One such example is the Sago mine disaster. On January 2nd, 2006, an explosion at Sago mine in West Virginia trapped several miners underground. Sylvia went on a radio program called Coast to Coast AM, and at the start of the broadcast, it was believed that 12 of the 13 of the miners had been found alive. When they asked her about the miners, she said that they were going to be found. However, it was discovered after that the earlier news report was in error and only one of them was found alive. After which Sylvia changed her story and said, "I don't think there's anyone down there, maybe one." The mine disaster event is a key event in Sylvia Browne's career for skeptics and the like, because it's a time when people started realizing that this is proof that she takes news that she just heard and tries to sell it off as a prediction that she just had before the rest of the world hears all the news, before it spreads everywhere. This is all before the internet, so it took time for news to spread. In this next section, join me as we do a thought exercise where we critically analyze Sylvia's predictions, and I want you to use the ideas from this for anyone else that you suspect might be defrauding somebody or someone that you are questioning in any way. And other examples of this where she either just used common sense, or she was reading articles, she would read medical journals, she would read different stories, she was staying on top of Hollywood drama, like she was constantly reading up on everything and making sure that she was aware of everything going on so that she could predict things properly. So let's go and take a look at a little clip of a few of her predictions on Montel, and we can discuss them a little bit.
How about Britney Spears? She's going to get a divorce.
Oh, yeah.
With baby in tow.
Oh, and baby in tow.
All right, anyone who was alive during that time could have predicted that that marriage was not going to last with Britney Spears.
It's Britney Spears, we know what happened to her and Kevin.
Right.
But some people would say that anybody could have guessed that. How about, vaccinations? Now, this is a big one, because everybody's talking about coming out with vaccines for everything, for cancer.
Especially cancer. But
What
this
that
has
means.
already just come out. In fact, they're talking about it in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical. And I made it last year. It's a hormone that they found that's going to keep people's weight off.
So they said that she was able to tell that that came true because, yeah, they discovered something. But she started that whole thing saying that she read that in the Journal of American Medicine.
Talking about it in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical.
And, this was years back, and this, I think, led to the Ozempic stuff. Montel tries to use that as an example that she predicted correctly, but she started the whole prediction saying that she just read about this.
You said that there would be a vaccine for cancer, and in June of 2006, the FDA licensed the new vaccine for cervical cancer, which is the #2 killer of women. And this month, New Hampshire will be the first state to offer the vaccination for free of charge to all girls 11 to 18.
Okay, now just to discuss the vaccines, it takes a really long time for something to be approved. She already talked about how she's reading the Journal of American Medicine and she's reading other journals, which means she's highly aware of things that are being currently worked on that have not been FDA approved. So she would have read about the HPV vaccine when it was being tested, because it takes like a decade or more for something like that to be approved as a vaccine. It has to go through tons of testing. Not to mention getting it approved for free by the government in the United States. It takes a long time for a law and a bill to pass like that. So she didn't predict it. She read about it and then she's like, oh, I'm going to predict that when it's coming up due to being released. Like, she's just staying on top of certain knowledge so that she can predict it later.
Discovery of a new hormone. Discovery of a new hormone to help you lose weight. Yes, in December 2006, a new study showed that long-acting insulin called Levemir actually reduces body fat in type 2 diabetes patients.
Okay, he said that was reported December 6th. When she goes and does these end-of-year prediction shows, it's in December when she goes on that show. So, like, that was announced the time that she was on the show. Like, she probably just read about it, and it hadn't been reported on yet for Montel or whoever to realize, like, this is what she did back then. She was always just on top of information so that she looked like she was predicting correctly, a few things here and there, so then it would make the rest of her predictions seem accurate.
And then I see another earthquake in India. I see another earthquake in Mexico. I see volcanoes going up everywhere. I mean, it's just depressing.
And this is just a generalized, there's always earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, things like that all over the world. So there's just a general guess at some kind of world disaster, nature. It happens every year. There's never a break from it. This is very generalized.
Well, what about President Bush and his popularity? Is that going to continue to wane?
Yes. I think it will continue to wane until he starts bringing troops home.
If anyone was alive back then, we all could have predicted that. That was a big thing back then. Anyone was predicting that. That's just common sense.
And it tanked.
I'll give you that one, but we'll give you that one.
So my point in just going over one of those with you is to just kind of show you how she came up with her predictions. Like, I'm just trying to kind of give you an example of how she designed her predictions and how she was able to get a few of them right. And then we would just kind of do a confirmation bias. People would do that. They'd see, oh, well, she got these few things right, so everything else she says must be right as well. And she doesn't lie to us. Of course she doesn't lie to us, but yeah, she does. She lies all the time. There's other clips of her making predictions of things, and I could go through and pick apart all of them if you really wanted me to, but for now we'll just leave it at that one clip show. There's other ones, of course. But yeah, hopefully kind of get, what I'm getting at with it and realize how she's been doing it. And besides the missing children and the cases that she's working on that devastated families and, she ruined lives with that stuff, she also was making predictions on people's health and diseases, and she was giving people medical advice. Like, this is the kind of stuff that is just really scummy. Like, between the kids and the families of missing kids, and then now this stuff with medical advice, it's absolutely horrible. Here's one story of a man who's dying of cancer.
Terry Flans knew her son Mark was dying of cancer.
He was in a coma.
But she prayed he would win the fight of his life.
And I thought the old Mark was coming back. But that just lasted one day, and then from then on it was just downhill.
And he kept getting worse. So 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Flans went to the St. Louis appearance of self-proclaimed psychic Sylvia Browne, silently pleading for help.
I got to talk to her. And my number was the first one picked. And I was so excited. This is unbelievable. Told my son was dying, and I was wanting to know if he was going to live. And she matter-of-factly said, yes, he's going to live. My son is in the hospital. I'm the first one. Yeah, we know we get any way for the people to save him. Yeah, they will save him. What's the sense of hope with us? Keep it there for a while. I wanted to believe her. Yeah, I believed her. He starts regaining strength even at the end of this month. They're not going to give him that long. They're only giving him a coyote of a dam.
2 days later, Mark was dead.
Mark didn't want to die in the hospital. He wanted to go home. But Sylvia Browne told us that he was going to live to the end of the month and he'd get better. My daughter-in-law wanted to take him home with hospice. But she was so negative because she thought she was doing the wrong thing because of what Sylvia Browne said.
Her ticket to the Sylvia Browne show cost $45. It was a gift from her daughter-in-law. During our recent visit to Browne's headquarters in California, business manager Linda Rossi told us that anyone disappointed with Browne's readings will get their money back.
We do refunds.
Really?
Really? I got the accounting to prove it. We do refunds.
Rossi didn't respond to my questions about Browne's comments to Terry Flans, or if Browne would refund the admission for Flans' family.
What would you want to say to Sylvia Browne today?
Wow. I'd say, well, you goofed. And it wasn't fair for what you told me because it wasn't true. And I'm angry and I'm upset with you. But I forgive you. Because you're only a human and you're not able to predict the future. That's what I tell her.
During the last few weeks, we tried repeatedly to interview Sylvia Browne, but she did not respond to our requests. KMOV.com, News 4.
And what's interesting in that story, you know, they asked about refunds, and her business managers, they're like, oh yeah, we do refunds. But I found a story on someone who paid $700 from these phone readings, and the phone readings are just horrible, but she asked for a refund because everything was incorrect. And she was sent a standard refund policy letter and said, the services provided by Sylvia Browne Corporation are highly speculative in nature, and we do not guarantee that the results of our work will be satisfactory to a client, and they would not refund her money. So I don't know how much they really do refunds, because it doesn't seem like they didn't refund that ticket price, and they didn't seem to refund this call either. And when I read through the article of the fellow that went on the cruise too, he said that some people were requesting refunds from the cruise, but he never heard of that they got their refunds. So I don't know if anyone actually ever got any refunds, to be honest. But while I was also doing research for this, I came across there's a Yelp page for Sylvia Browne Corporation, because her son still runs it, right? Like, she has passed away, but her son is psychic apparently, and he still runs it. And there's a lot of reviews in here that aren't very good. So I waited 6 months for Sylvia's call. She was completely wrong about so many things and right about none of them. I told her errors and she just made something up in the moment. I've read her books before the reading, like most of you, $500 for a scam. This one is about her son, Chris. First of all, Chris was an hour late calling me. No excuse for that. He was very rude, seemed annoyed to be giving a reading. He didn't say a single thing that was helpful or insightful. I ended the call early because he sucks so much. I want my money back and would not recommend him. Don't waste your money. Another person, 1 star. Miss Browne and her son were wrong on my readings, predictions. They told me I would have good health. I ended up with multiple sclerosis. My relationship was good. My girlfriend and I parted a few months later. I work for a great company. I was laid off in 3 months. This cost me $1,000 for the reading by Sylvia and $700 for her son. I don't know why this guy paid for 2 readings. Oh my gosh. But anyways, yeah, you can kind of see, I will link these in my references, but you can read about the different actual readings that people paid for. So I do want to talk about Sylvia. You know, the Kardashians came forward saying that Sylvia predicted the 2020 pandemic. It was in her book End of Days that was released in 2010. This book is filled with so many predictions. She literally is throwing spaghetti at a wall and just seeing what's stuck. And she actually had predictions for multiple diseases and multiple pandemics. But she said around 2020, a severe pneumonia-like illness will spread throughout the globe, attacking the lungs, the bronchial tubes, and resisting all known treatments. Almost more baffling than the illness itself will be the fact that it will suddenly vanish as quickly as it arrived, attack again 10 years later, and then disappear completely. So it's already incorrect because it didn't just suddenly vanish, it's still around, and it doesn't seem to be disappearing completely at all. However, keep in mind, you know, those of you, I don't know, depending on who's watching this in your age range or who remembers, but there was SARS. SARS happened before this COVID thing that happened. And she wrote the book after SARS. SARS was a big deal back then too. It was a big deal like COVID was. Like it spread like crazy, and there wasn't really protections in place, and that's why it spread so much. And when COVID showed up, they implemented the protections that they created after SARS outbreak happened. So, she's talking about all these viruses and outbreaks, but she experienced SARS already, and she's kind of basing these things off this. As well, before this prediction here, she talks about another contagious disease where she talks about victims will be quarantined. And you can see parts of it in the book. I can't get a full picture, but it says extremely contagious disease. Victims will be quarantined until it's discovery that the bacteria can be destroyed through some combination of electrical current and extreme heat. Like she talks about different diseases, a bunch of them all in a row, and just one of them happened to stick. And the Kardashians brought it up, so people of course made a big deal of it. I just want to cover that in this video because I think it's silly and people seem to have forgotten about SARS that happened before, and that's what a lot of these predictions are based on. And her book had a lot of other silly predictions too. I'll just read a couple of them. The common cold will be over with by about 2009 and 2010. In 2010, it'll be mandated that a DNA sample of every infant born in the US is taken and recorded at the time of the baby's birth. There will be a successful manned exploration of Mars in 2012. In 2014, a law will be passed stating that if anyone accuses another person of felony, the person that made that accusation will then serve the sentence if they falsely accuse someone. Oh yeah, this one. 2015, telemarketers will have long since vanished. Yeah, that's not going anywhere. She was just kind of guessing everything, and she made a whole book, and if any, there's probably like 5 things came true, and it's like, yeah, a lot of these are just educated guesses, and she's kind of just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. Now lastly, her last prediction, she predicted on Larry King Live 2003 that she would die at age 88. She instead died in 2013 at age 77. Critics and skeptical inquiry. Sylvia had quite a number of critics. There was the famous website, stopsylviabrowne.com, where he listed everyone's stories, anyone who wanted to come forward, bring a story, and he would pretty much just post any sort of link or article or anything to try to get the word out, because Sylvia was quite good at kind of hiding some of the bad stuff that was going on in her life. At the beginning of the internet, she was able to kind of squash some stuff and hide it. So he was trying to make sure that stuff stayed out in the open. But her most famous one is her fight with James Randi. That is the amazing Randi. He's a magician, and just like in the early 20th century, where Houdini was and other magicians were trying to take out different spiritualists and psychics and prove that they were all grifters, James Randi was sort of in the same boat too. But James actually has, and I think it's still ongoing, there's like a Randi Foundation where it's $1 million prize to anyone who can prove the paranormal or the supernatural. They had a little tiff going between James and Sylvia, where on the Larry King Live show, she said that she would take his test to prove that she was psychic. It went on back and forth, the challenge, because she said, oh, well, I'm not going to take the test until he proves the money is in the bank. And then he showed her that it was in the bank, and she said, that's not good enough. I want to see it inside like an escrow account or something like that to prove that it would be accessible to her. So he did that, and he sent her proof of it. And she ended up actually sending the mail back to sender so that she never saw the proof. And she just kept saying on television shows, oh, I've seen no proof of it. I've seen no proof of it.
Why is it you have such a, pardon the expression, hard on for me? I mean, what is it with you and I when we're both Jewish people?
Well,
and
Sylvia, here's what it is. You asked me. You lied to me on May 16th of 2003 on Larry's show when I was a caller. I asked you, why do you keep promising to be tested by the James Randi Educational Foundation for your alleged psychic? Wait a minute, Sylvia. Sylvia, stop. Sylvia, you interrupted me 3 times that night of the program, and I'd like to finish, please. I asked you why you've been avoiding this test. You said Randi can't verify that he has the money. Randi and I both, you said if I send you or Randi sends you verification of the money, that you would take the test. You said that on Larry's show on May 16th.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, you did, Sylvia. Wait a minute, Sylvia, I'm not finished. So the next week, Randy and I both sent you.
Doctor. What did you send?
We sent you verification of the money, Sylvia, and you refused the mail and returned it to sender. So I thought I'd show it to you tonight so that you can't avoid that any longer.
Oh, that's good.
So you see that, Sylvia? There's $1 million.
Why would you?
There's $1 million, Sylvia. A big reason I have it in for her, if you want to call it that, is the misinformation effect when she does health readings, which I consider to be potentially very dangerous.
Now, this whole tiff between her and James carried on for quite a while. And in the end, you know, she ended up saying that she wouldn't take the test because he's not a godly man. And then she ended up just saying officially that she doesn't have anything to prove. So
He's been bordering on a malicious persecution of Sylvia. Why doesn't he go after the charlatans, the true charlatans that are out there billing
What's so bad about Sylvia Browne? What's so bad about Sylvia Browne?
There's nothing intrinsically bad about Sylvia Browne that isn't bad about all of the people who pretend to the grieving people out there who need them or believe they need them that they can speak to the dead. No, I've gone after Sylvia Browne because she's a big figure. Would you mind?
So, Linda, you're saying Sylvia would not take the test, bottom
No,
line.
because she has nothing to prove to James Randi. She has nothing to prove to James Randi. Her spiritual work speaks for itself.
Well,
Over
we'll let the
15
audience
years
to take the
of
test
work.
We'll let the audience be the judge on that.
as well, another big critic of Sylvia and really all the psychics of the 90s was John Oliver. In 2019 segment on Last Week Tonight, John Oliver actually criticized the media for promoting Browne and other psychics, enabling them to prey on grieving families. He said, and I quote, "When psychic abilities are presented as authentic, it emboldens a vast underworld of unscrupulous vultures more than happy to make money by offering an open line to the afterlife as well as many other BS services." And he does have a point here, because on the StopSylviaBrowne.com website, a lot of people were coming forward too, saying like they had missing kids and things of that nature, and they're being inundated with psychics who are offering to help them if they paid a fee. All these psychics were offering to always help if you pay a fee, and that's not really helping. And the couple times people did give in and end up hiring a psychic, any information that they gave them did not help in the assistance of finding their missing people. Now, there was a very in-depth investigation done on her over time in the Skeptical Inquirer. Now, the Skeptical Inquirer is a magazine published by the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, and the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry was actually one of the founding members was James Randi. It was originally called Committee for Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, or CSICOP. He was an original member of the Executive Council, and he was one of a few who helped pave the way for the Skeptical Inquirer to really thrive. Honestly, it's a really good website or magazine. If you don't already know about it, Skeptical Inquirer has a lot of really well done articles and investigations, and it's a really good source to actually confirm information from. But let's talk a little bit about what happened with the Skeptical Inquirer investigation. So in 2010, there was an article called Psychic Defective, Sylvia Browne's History of Failure. And at that time, they compiled every publicly available prediction that Browne made on missing persons and death cases, so any like criminal cases. It totaled 115 readings, and it concluded that Sylvia Browne was correct only 0 times. 25 cases she was mostly wrong on. There were 90 that had unknown outcomes, so you couldn't say either way, but, you know, she's pretty vague in some of her stuff. And this was 2010, and shortly after this, it was a few years later, the Amanda Berry thing happened, and there was updates on other cases as well. So they actually did an update to this article, and they actually brought the cases up to 116 cases, and they found that there were changes in 11 cases with previously unknown conclusions, showing that Browne was mostly wrong, and 8 with 3 remaining in the unknown category. So the result of this investigation of her cases is that Browne has still never been mostly correct in a single case, and 33 cases have been incorrect. 83 have unverified outcomes as well. Now, you have to remember Sylvia Browne would always go around saying that she was 85% correct in all of her cases that she did for the police. So this right here shows that those numbers are just not the case. And this was a 3-year study. Like, they published this in 2010, but they spent 3 years going over these cases and going over everything that she ever did. So it's a very well thought out article, and I do have it linked as well in my references. And there's a 2013 follow-up article with the cases that I mentioned as well. In 2015, Montel Williams officially apologized to Amanda Berry as well for Sylvia Browne's incorrect prediction and the pain that it caused her. Speaking of the Skeptical Inquirer, during their time of looking into Sylvia Browne, well, the interesting thing is, once someone dies, you can do a Freedom of Information Act. She would always say that she worked on FBI cases. She even said that she worked on the Ted Bundy case and things like that. So they decided that they were going to FOIA the FBI and anyone else they could to confirm whether or not she actually worked on any of these cases. So Ryan Schaefer is the one who did this investigation, and the article appeared in the Skeptical Inquirer around January, February of 2015. So when he did the FOIA, he looked for Browne without an E and with an E as well, asked for all files, any alleged psychic abilities, etc., etc. What he ended up getting back was actually an investigation report on Sylvia Browne, that they were investigating her for bank fraud and embezzlement. And this is a whole other thing. So Browne was hiding this for some time, and this leads us down another rabbit hole. Well, the FBI were assuming that she was using her church, because yes, she started a church, and we'll get into that she was using her church to embezzle money into, and they were unable to fully prove it, so they weren't able to go forward with an investigation, but they were able to prove some of her fraud, and she actually did have official charges on her record, and she did actually get convicted for something. Before we talk about that, one more thing is I just want to talk about, she had someone back her up from the FBI saying that she did work for the FBI, and this I think made her like sound more credible. Sorry, this is me editing and I start forgetting words here at this part of the video because the fireball kicks in, so I'm gonna pop in and try to put the correct words in when I can. And he went on TV saying that she was working with the FBI and she worked with him on cases. However, the FBI agent who backed her, his name was Ted Gunderson. He's a retired senior special agent that was in charge of the FBI in Los Angeles. The problem with him is that he was a little bit of a conspiracy nut, and a lot of the things he said just weren't even true. He did say and I quote, "I've worked with numerous psychics in the past and very few are really on target, but Sylvia Browne is probably one of the most accurate psychics in the country." However, she never actually worked with the FBI. Gunderson was known for promoting a lot of conspiracy theories, including the child slave labor for underground alien control facilities. He was like one of the big ones at the center of this satanic panic that turned out to like not be true. And he has a bunch of other like crazy conspiracy theories. So yes, he backed her, but it was kind of a lie. So it doesn't look too good. And as well, Browne also said that she helped with the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993, the 1993 one that happened. And they did a FOIA as well, asking for interviews with the FBI specifically on that event. And the FBI came back saying, no, Sylvia Browne, there's nothing to do with her on that event. So Ted Gunderson was already questionable to begin with, and this just furthers like that he's just not reliable, as anything that he says just isn't really reliable. But let's get back to what she was convicted for. Business ventures and fraud. So in 1986, when Sylvia kind of came to California, she actually founded a Gnostic Christian church in Campbell, California, known as the Society of Novus Spiritus. She was also head of the Sylvia Browne Corporation and Sylvia Browne Enterprises. So her church's essentially mission statement: this society was created to decimate the teachings that have been received over the past 25 years from Sylvia. Nova Spiritus strives to uncover all the mysteries regarding nature of life, death, God, and the role humans play in life's schemes. Members believe that God never withholds information, though individuals may choose to ignore it. It goes on for quite a while, but essentially they believe in God, but they don't believe in Satan or heaven or hell or sin or punishment or anything of that nature. And they believe that you're here, your spirit's here to like learn whatever it's going to learn in this lifetime. Then it gets reincarnated to experience another lifetime, etc., etc. So it essentially is centered around a person's spiritual growth more than anything. They held weekly services, and the odd thing about this is they worked through lessons that were created by Sylvia. Those who completed the initial 17 lessons could choose to take higher lessons to become a deacon or ordained minister of the society, and then they move further up into the church. It functions a lot like other, cults like Scientology. It really does, the way that it kind of works. The thing is, though, how does she have all like the money for all this stuff, right? Because she originally started her corporation in 1974, and that was the Nirvana Foundation for Psychic Research, which became the Sylvia Browne Corporation. And she wasn't famous yet, and yet she had a ton of money, apparently. But no, she was just kind of lying to the bank so that she could get loans. So in the late 1980s, and this is when, she started appearing on different shows and things like that, she was starting to get a little bit of fame. Well, she started getting investigated for all these bank loans. The bank loans, the FBI believed that she was taking the money from the bank loans and funneling it into her church. And she's using the church really just for tax exempt status. And that's the whole reason that she started it. But they were able to prove that there was fraud within the bank loans. She essentially lied about what her assets were. She essentially lied to the bank so that she could get loans. So in 1992, Browne, it was her and her husband, that Kensal Browne, they did this together. So in 1992, they were indicted on several charges of investment fraud and grand theft. And this is where the FBI was investigating them, as they suspected that they funneled the money into the church to protect it. So if they claimed bankruptcy or defaulted on a loan, the money was still within the church. As well, the Superior Court of Santa Clara County, California, found that Browne and her husband sold securities in a gold mining venture under false pretenses. In at least one instance, they told a couple that their $20,000 investment was to be used for operating costs of a mine as well. Instead, the money was transferred into the account for the Sylvia Browne Corporation, the Nirvana Foundation of Psychic Research, it was called at that time. So they were ripping off banks, and they were ripping off people too. In the end, Browne pled no contest to the securities fraud and was indicted on grand larceny on May 26, 1992. The couple each received 1 year probation. In addition, Browne was sentenced to 200 hours of community service. So she didn't have to do any jail time, so that didn't affect any of her TV interviews, because it's like 1992 and she's on the Montel show and she's hiding all this stuff. No one knows that this is going on. This came out after, when the internet became big, and after she died and people did these FOIA requests, they realized, oh, she was like convicted of this stuff, right? She's convicted of fraud. So in the first FOIA request that he did, all the documents they got back were this whole investigation on Sylvia Browne. And there were copies of loan applications or different financial details and things that they're investigating for her. So it was a pretty big investigation, especially if the FBI was doing it. Then it was kind of a big deal, because once you get up to FBI, then it's no longer just like a state only like investigation or within your own state or your own city. But people still support her. There are still like diehards that hang on, but a lot of people are falling off. So that's the in-depth thing about Sylvia, but let's talk a little bit. Let's touch on some other famous 90s psychics. First off, well, we touched on him a little bit, and I'll just kind of touch on him here. There's Sylvia's son. So Sylvia's son ended up taking over the business, and he writes books and does readings and things of that nature, and he's actively doing this to this day. We saw some of the reviews I showed you there. I'll just touch on him to kind of explain this is where the path is is gone. He still sells books. He still sells the lessons. You know, everything's still running. Just he's kind of running it all. So Sylvia Browne and her organization still lives on even after her death through her son here. Based on the reviews, it sounds like he's not accurate at all either, and he doesn't have any special gifts because Sylvia didn't have any either. But I just wanted to touch on him because it kind of tells you the story of where Sylvia Browne Corporation has headed. Now, the other 90s psychics, I just want to bring up like two of them. One is very famous Miss Cleo, because in the 90s, I don't know, depending how old you are, you might remember there was the Psychic Friends Network, and you could call a psychic, and it was like a 1-900 number, and you'd be charged like per minute that you stayed on the phone with these people. So Miss Cleo, she was born Yuri Del Harris on August 12, 1962 in Los Angeles, California. She was already an actress as well, and she was most known for portraying Miss Cleo, who was a spokeswoman for Psychic Call Service, and it was called the Psychic Readers Network. I believe it became the Psychic Friends Network at one point. That's what I remember anyway, but I might be wrong. But she had different aliases in the commercials. There was like different names that they called her by, but she was most famous for Miss Cleo. Harris was using a Jamaican accent when she moved to Florida and began working as a tarot reading psychic for the telemarketing center. She was approached while working at an event and agreed to appear in an ad. And the whole point of all this is keep people on the phone as long as possible, keep telling them what they wanted to hear because they get charged per minute. But she was a complete fake, right? She appeared on the infomercials and she claimed to be a shaman from Jamaica as well. And on the website, it said that she was born in Jamaica and grew up there, but she was born in California. She was born in the United States. In the end, the psychic network fell apart. People found out about deceptive advertising. There was fraud and things like that began to surface. And there were complaints and things of that nature coming out. A lot of people were also found to be they were just actors reading off scripts. And that's pretty much how they were kind of running the psychic networks. Now, another psychic as well from back in the day is James Van Praagh. He was a writer like Sylvia as well, and he appeared on TV. He said that he was clairvoyant spiritual medium, just like Sylvia, wrote numerous books, and had some on the New York Times bestseller as well. He was part of a show called Living with the Dead, starring Ted Danson, and he also hosted a paranormal talk show as well called Beyond with James Van Praagh. So James used tactics such as hot reading, where pretty much there'd be like people in the audience who were listening to people, or like they would ask questions about people in the audience, and then that stuff would be fed to him, and then he would do like audience readings based off the information that he gathered while they were all waiting for him to show up into the room, right? Which is a little bit different from Sylvia, who kind of did like, she did a little bit of just vagueness, but also she did cold readings too. And I didn't really get too much into cold reading and mentalist stuff and everything in this episode, because I am going to cover that in a future episode when I do John Edward. We're going to get into the details of mentalists and cold reading and things of that nature. This episode here, I really just wanted to talk about psychics of the 90s, and especially Sylvia Browne, because I remember her quite vividly when I was younger. But if you want to learn a bit more about each of them, definitely check them out. Google them. Interesting stories. There's a lot of psychics around at this time, to be honest, but these are some of the big ones. But let's talk about like what was going on in the 90s. Why were the psychics so popular at that time? Spiritualist movement. The 90s was the tail end of the 21st century, and all during the 21st century, I just realized I said 21st century in a bunch of places. I'm going to correct it to 20th century. I meant 20th century. I'm going to correct it to 20th century as best I can. So this is the tail end of the 20th century, and the 20th century was very much fueled a lot by the spiritualist movement. The beginning of the 1900s it was like the tail end of the Victorian spiritualism movement, and it kind of just carried on. Like it took like a little bit of a break. It all got debunked by magicians and everything. All the fake psychics disappeared, and there was like a little bit of a lull. And then, I guess it was like maybe 50s, 60s, where like there wasn't really psychics and stuff showing up. And then it was about the end of the 60s. Maybe it's about the 60s, and then it went on into like 70s, 80s, and 90s, and there was like a whole New Age spiritualist movement. So the 90s was the tail end of that New Age movement, which was a more modern spiritualism movement. One of the big things in the 60s I remember always hearing about was the Age of Aquarius. So a common belief in the New Age is that humanity has entered or is coming into a period known as the Age of Aquarius. This is characterized as a new age of love, joy, peace, and abundance and harmony. It's the golden age. And this was like one of the things people talked about quite a bit in the 60s. There's actually like songs and stuff where they sing about the Age of Aquarius. I think there's a song fully called Age of Aquarius as well. It's also described as highly positive time, a time for celebration, and it's supposed to be a utopia as well. However, some people also see it as an apocalyptic movement. It is a astrological prediction, like an astrological prediction. But the thing is, if you look into the Age of Aquarius, it's like, it's said that it's to start at all sorts of different times. Like they thought it was starting in 1960s. Now they're saying it's going to start in 2150. Some people believe it's going to start in 2500. It's supposed to be like every 2000 years. So I think like right now, I think we're supposed to be in it. This doesn't really feel like an Age of Aquarius. But anyway, it's something, if you're interested, definitely look into it. It's interesting. It's an interesting read. There's a lot of detail to it. I didn't want to like go over every little thing. There's a lot to it. But it's quite interesting. Age of Aquarius, New Age movement. Okay, now let's talk about a little bit into each decade. So it kind of started in the 1960s. So from, a historical perspective here, New Age movement is most often associated with the counterculture that was created with the Beatles. And the Beatles started incorporating some like Hindu philosophy and things like that. And they were kind of experimenting with transcendental meditation, which is a form of silent meditation. It involves a silent repetition of a mantra or a sound, and you practice it 15 to 20 minutes twice per day. It's a non-religious method that promotes relaxed awareness, stress relief, self-development, and higher states of consciousness. A lot of it relates back to human consciousness and the inner self and finding meaning of life, etc., etc. A very spiritual, obviously it's linked into the New Age movement. Some people say that this truly kickstarted the human potential movement that became the New Age movement. As well, part of the New Age movement, we talk about spiritualism and religion. In the New Age movement, there isn't like a specific religion that's right or wrong. And there's different holistic interpretation of the universe as well as dualistic good and evil. So there has to be good, there has to be evil, negative events aren't interpreted as bad or evil. They're just interpreted as a lesson to be learned or something to balance the good. And that also came around too when healing and holistic healing showed up around this time as well in the 1970s. Actually, I think it started end of the 1960s into the 1970s. And this was all connected with this human potential movement that was later renamed to the New Age movement. So by the early 1970s, the term New Age was increasingly common, and that was being used quite a bit. As well, in the 1970s, this also started a lot of the female empowerment movement. There was different stuff going on during this time for women, and if you're interested, definitely look into it. But it's things like, women being able to properly work and get paid proper wages, different things like that. There was different laws and things that were being allowed for women at this time. It was very important. It was a very important time for women. So that was really kind of pushing a lot of the New Age stuff as well. By the 1980s, a lot of people dropped the term New Age, and they were kind of moving a little bit out of it, but they were still kind of in it, and they were trying to not put a label on it. In the 1990s, they say that the term died, but I remember the 90s, I grew up in the psychic psychic circuit, you can call it a circus. And We still call it like New Age. Like I would always tell people, "Oh, my mom's a New Agey." Oh, I grew up like in the New Age movement. Like I grew up around New Age stuff. So like I don't know. The term was still pretty used from what I remember. And the thing is, like during this time, people were trying to find themselves and they were trying to do personal growth. And so if someone came out with anything that had to do with religion or spiritualism or personal growth or trying to understand the world or, you know, different things like that, people would just jumped on it. So like you could write a book where you just make stuff up like L. Ron Hubbard did, right? And just make stuff up about, and that's essentially what Sylvia did, about like what heaven looks like and this and all that. And people just believed it back then. If you wrote well enough, then people would jump on board. And that's sort of how a lot of these psychics became really famous. The psychics like Sylvia Browne. And it was a big deal back then. I don't know. I like lived in it. I mean, if any of you guys have questions, I guess feel free to ask me below. But these psychic fairs, they were big. There was tons of psychics. There were people that take pictures of your aura, people that do psychic reading, past life regression. There was Reiki. My mom was all certified in all this stuff too, right? This was like a big business at that time. Like it was only temporary, obviously, because it was only really big in the 90s. But it was something. Yeah. So anyway, so like I understand why people like fell for Sylvia. Even I remember watching her and I was like amazed by her predictions and everything, but I was stuck in the confirmation bias looking back at it now. I'm like, oh yeah, the stuff that she said she got right is sort of stuff that is kind of obvious. She was guessing an obvious guess that we all knew. So anyway.
Today we're going to be talking about guilt. The only time that you really commit a wrong is when you do it with motive.
Reflecting on Sylvia Browne's legacy raises important questions about the ethics of psychic claims and their impact on society. The lack of accountability in the psychic industry is, of course, a concern. There is no regulatory body that's overseeing them, and honestly, there never will be. And that's a whole separate video. I'll get into Harry Houdini. It's actually talk about it a bit in my seance video. But this lack of oversight allows psychics to make unsubstantiated claims without facing any consequences for their actions. In the end, we should approach any psychics or any claims like this with a healthy dose of skepticism and evaluate everything with a critical eye. Claims should never be taken at face value. I do enjoy talking with you guys down in the comments below about this kind of stuff, so please go ahead, leave a comment, let me know what you think. Now, this particular video is talking about the psychics. I will be doing another video on John Edwards and talking about cold reading and mentalists as well. That'll be coming in a couple of weeks. For now, what I'll do is I'll link this video over to my seances video where I talk about the history of seances and the spiritualist movement, Houdini, things of that nature. It's actually quite interesting. Thank you guys for stopping by. I appreciate it, and I always enjoy seeing you down in the comments and enjoying these videos. Have a good night. Also, thank you to our first member, Dan DeLynch. I'll have him up on screen here. This is our mascot. I keep forgetting to put him in videos, so here he is.